I'm Birkan Gündüz. My student number is GUN17006641, and this is my research project assignment 3. For my research project, I gave myself 5 objectives. I'll be going through them and showing evidence that I have completed them. My first objective was to define shots in the game, fouls, and work rate. As you can see here, I have found definitions of shots, fouls, and work rate, and I've stated what they are. Uh, the next one was to design a notational analysis system to compare two performances by Arsenal and Mesut Ozil. Over here, you can see that by using Dartfish, I made a tagging system, um, and I added a hotkey for each thing. As you can see here, it says my event buttons are shots and fouls. My continuous event buttons are walking, jogging, and sprinting, and everything else is a keyword button. The third objective was to compare the shots in the game, the shots, fouls, and work rates in the game of Arsenal and Mesut Ozil. And over here, you can see the work rate performed by Mesut Ozil against Manchester City. And in Figure 2b, you can see the distribution of work rate performed by Mesut Ozil against Leicester. And as you can see here, I've compared the two. And finally, the last two were to analyse two performances of shots, fouls, and work rate of Arsenal and Mesut Ozil, and to discuss the two performances of shots, fouls, and work rates of Arsenal and Mesut Ozil. I won't read through it all, but I'll leave the slide on for a little bit so you can skim through. And there we go. For my strengths and why I feel this project went well is because I chose a sport I knew very well. I'm a very big football fan, so I know the rules. I understand the way of playing. I understand formations, and having this previous knowledge of the game helped me analyze the sport better, and it also made me understand how fouls work, why something is a foul, how to identify a foul, and it made my analysis a lot better, and also made my data collection more reliable. I also finished the project on time. This means that I was consistent throughout, and I didn't have to rush to give my project in. For example, if I gave my project late, it may show signs that I was rushing it to finish it off. But because I finished it on time, it means that I did everything well. I didn't rush anything, so I didn't collect data incorrectly, and I made sure I analysed it very well, making my data more reliable. And I used Dartfish for data collection, and Dartfish is an amazing an amazing application that you can have for your computer to analyze games, as it allows you to watch games by speeding it up, slowing it down, pausing it, unpausing it, doing it frame by frame to see when the shot happened or when the foul happened. And it also allows you to make key buttons, so you can identify who committed the foul or who committed or who took the shot. And also it gives you a little table as well. It allows you to transfer your findings onto a table to present it to present your data. So it was really helpful for me in that part. However, there were weaknesses. This was my first time using Dartfish, so I did come with some problems did come with it. For example, sometimes the keywords didn't work because I didn't configure it to my keys on the keyboard. So sometimes my data came out wrong, so I had to do the analysis again. Um, we had some problems starting it up. We had some problems setting it up. Um, Overall, it's expected when you're using Dartfish for the first time. The reason why this is a weakness is because I don't know the ins and outs of Dartfish. If I did something wrong, I wouldn't notice it. But if I already had experience of Dartfish, and if I did something wrong, I would notice it because I would understand why, you know, if something happened, like this should happen, but because I've never used Dartfish, I don't know what happens if I do something wrong. So I would completely ignore the fact that I did something wrong and just carry on, which would make my data even more unreliable. And it also did eat up some time just getting used to it. My second weakness was that Mesut Ozil was not always on the screen. This was a struggle because for work rate, I could only record what I could see. For example, if uh, the camera was on Mesut Ozil and he was walking, um, then I would record it. But if it was off him, I couldn't keep putting down that he was walking because I wouldn't know. So I could only record what I could see. Um, but for all I knew, he may have started sprinting or jogging. So this makes my uh, makes my data a little bit unreliable because um, it doesn't show a true representation of Özil's work rates because I haven't kept my eye on him at all times. Um, it's not very accurate. And finally, I only assessed two matches. And if you think about it, there are 38 games in a season, and I only assessed two of them to. Uh, so it's a bit hard to justify um, like how good a team is just by two games. Um, I would much prefer it if I did have more time. I'd have much preferred it to about 10 games, and maybe even 15 to make it even more reliable. But I think making a conclusion of how good a team is just off of two games makes my conclusion and my data a bit invalid because I only watched two games, and that could have been their two worst games or their two best games. What would I change or keep the same? Um, the things I would change is I would analyze more matches once again. This is because I'll be able to have more data, and therefore my conclusions and my points would be backed up with more evidence, which would make my project valid and my findings valid. And I would also collect the data more than once. So, for example, due to time constraints, I only watched each game once. And to ensure that I get the same data and to make sure that my results are reliable in the future, I would uh, collect data more than once by watching the game again. I know it'd be a little bit boring, but you know, if it makes my project better than it is and more reliable, I would definitely collect data more than once. I would also collect more performance criteria. By this I mean I only collected shots, fouls, and work rate, but I didn't include passes, um, offsides, uh, corners, or anything like that. Um, because football is more than just shooting and fouls and working hard. It's there are a lot of different aspects of football, and it is a bit. It would be a lot better if I uh, collected more than just shots, fouls, and work rate. However, the things I would keep the same is to keep the sport the same. Once again, as I said, I know football very well. I've been supporting it. I know the ins and outs of it. Um, so it will make my data more reliable. It will make my analysis more reliable as well because I know about the game. Um, Once again, I would use Dartfish again because Dartfish was it was really an amazing app. It really made data collection a lot easier because instead of doing hand notation, I did computer notation, which makes everything more reliable because with hand notation, um, I could start getting bored. There's a high chance of natural human error. So with the computer notation, it made everything a little bit more reliable. And I would also keep the same work ethic. Thankfully, uh, the Bridgewater and Taunton College gave us computer rooms, so we had an allocated amount of time per session per week, and this really helped me out because I knew that in that hour I'll be able to do the project and nothing else. So I worked hard and I gave it in on time. Um, and I would, do exactly what I did last time by just, chipping away at the analysis and chipping away at the data presentation, um, and my overall, my discussion, my conclusion. I would keep that exactly the same. And how would I develop my project? The first way I could develop my project is by looking at more opposition to compare the team against. For example, I only looked at Manchester City and Leicester. You know, they are almost at the different ends of the spectrum. For example, Man City uh, are they always seem to win the title. They're always competing. Leicester City are very much a mid-table team, sometimes to the bottom of the table. But I'd much rather analyze, maybe 5 games against the top 6 or the top 8, and 5 games against the bottom to, see if there's any sort of consistency, any sort of correlation. See how well they do against better teams, against worse teams, and add some more analysis. Give me something to talk about. Give me something more to talk about. To make my analysis even better. Uh, Another way I could develop my investigation is by adding more performance criteria, because this will add more breadth and depth to the investigation. As I said, with passing and dribbles, I didn't even mention that dribbling, offsides, you know, all of this will add more talking points to my project. Um, I'll also be able to give more suggestions in areas of improvement. For example, if Arsenal make a lot of passes, but they don't have any shots, I would say maybe work on shooting more often rather than passing around the team, trying to pass it into the net. Make more runs into dangerous areas, or make more decisive passes instead of sideways, backwards. Pass forwards more to give your team the opportunity of getting in on goal and shooting more often. Something like that. It would help with my analysis of the team and could potentially make Arsenal better. If they take the information on board. And the last way I could develop my investigation is by looking at matches the season before and after to see if there was any improvement or development in the team. So, for example, the data I recorded was from 2015, and currently in 2019, the teams is completely different. There are different players, different. There's a different manager. And if I compare uh, the performance from 2015 to 2014, maybe see if there was any sort of development. Because I mean, with a football team, you want to get better each year. So by comparing the data from the season before to the season that they're in now, would really help me see if there's any sort of progression, any sort of development in the team. Yeah, and if there isn't, I'd be able to give them suggestions in how they would improve and how they would develop. And seeing at the future ones, I could see if they did develop, um, and see if if I could develop any further. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you for listening.